and Christy might need to tie me down to keep me in one spot, but I am going to try to sit still to help. So, okay, with that in mind, let's start off with a bit of a disclaimer. And I would like to make it very clear that this is not based on studies, this is not based on research. What I'm telling you today and sharing is strictly based on experiences. It's my experiences from all these years of interacting with all of you and learning so much from you. So this is just me kind of tying it all up into a neat package and giving it back to you, if you will. So with that being said, let's start with a very basic information on communication skills. This is something that is so very important in dealing with this. First of all, to me, probably the epitome of importance is being in face-to-face positioning with those who we're speaking to. And Ellen, you can go to the first slide for me if you would. Thank you, ma'am. To be at face-to-face position assures the person that you're talking to them. If you're speaking to someone behind their back or maybe in a crowded room, you will not necessarily have their full attention. But if you sit face to face, it becomes very obvious that you are speaking to them. Another thing is to direct your attention at eye level. If you think back to when you were perhaps in a classroom, the only person standing was the teacher. And that person was very intimidating to all of the students who were seated. So this carries through. If you're standing above someone, looking down on them, trying to interact, that can be extremely intimidating. So even if you have to squat by a chair, if you can't pull a chair up to get to eye level, just squatting down even helps. I've sat on the floor, I've knelt on the floor, I've squatted next to a chair until my knees wouldn't let me do it anymore. But it does really help, I find, and it helps to maintain that attention. Okay, in speaking, you want to use clear, simple language, meaning short sentences, using no unavoidable details. You want to avoid anything that's not necessary. Just stick to the basics. If there's a routine or a process, that's best understood if it's given step by step. Instead of telling a person, we're going to do 3 things today, and you tell them 1, 2, 3, it would be far better to say, we're going to start off the day by going to your doctor appointment. And then after the doctor appointment, you say, okay, we're going to stop at the grocery on the way home. And then perhaps the last thing is you're going to pick up a prescription from the pharmacy. But if you feed it to them one thing at a time, it's more likely to be understood. Also, you want to use words that that individual is most likely to understand. The terminology is very important. If you know this person very well, you draw on the background and use the vernacular, the terminology that they understand. If they were a nurse, you can use nursing terms. If they were a mother, you can use that terminology. But you don't want to use like professional, formal, or scientific language if it's something that they're not going to understand. So you want to use words that they get. Okay, next slide. Okay, do not expect an impaired individual to initiate conversation. And I thought about this after I wrote this up, and I thought, oh, I have a great example. If you've ever, as a child, participated in a birthday party where you did the game of pin the tail on the donkey, remember being blindfolded? And what made it so funny was that you had no idea where you were headed. Perhaps you were headed out the door or into the crowd. And it's like you had no way to know which direction. So to me, this is a great example of when you expect an individual who's impaired to initiate a conversation or even to answer an open-ended question. It's like they're grasping, it's very difficult. Much better to initiate the conversation yourself, perhaps with a question or a sentence or something that engages them. But don't expect them because it's too difficult. Okay, you also need to allow adequate time for responses because sometimes they're really having to think and they get frustrated if you push them too hard. So we want to give them enough time to reply to that. Okay, and we do want to encourage, and I'm having difficulty reading the slide because there's something in front of it. Let's see.
You have the printed out copy?
Yes. Okay, sorry. Thank you. I will do this. Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, we want to encourage participation in conversations with others. And I think this act of socialization proves to be really helpful because if they're not interacting in conversation with others, it's going to be difficult for them to interact with you as well. An example would be to encourage the doctors and other people to speak directly to that individual instead of talking around them. When I do a family meeting and the individual actually participates with us, I talk directly to that person. And I would hope our doctors are doing the same. I think it's very disrespectful to talk around and ignore the person who is sitting right in front of us. So I say if that person is not going to participate, I don't want them in our session. And the same, if you're not going to have them participate with a physician, I think it's worthwhile to not have them in the room at all with you so that you're interacting exactly one-on-one with that doctor or with me or whomever. Okay, and we want to allow them to verbalize their thoughts and feelings about the things that concern them. If they're worried about what's going on with them, if they're worried about how they might be ill or what they're going to do next, you want them to be able to express that. I think it's very difficult for them to be hushed or to be told, don't talk about that, or you don't need to know. I think they do need to be encouraged to verbalize. How are we going to know what's going on with them if we don't give them that opportunity? Okay, next slide. It's important to avoid talking down and ridiculing or embarrassing anybody about what they say. We do it on various levels when we talk with people who have similar functioning levels to us. It's okay to kind of throw little jabs, but this doesn't work when you're speaking to someone who's impaired because they're going to be taking you very literally. And if you're talking down or ridiculing, this is a kind of almost a sure way of getting them to stop interacting at all. They're going to be less open. They're going to be less likely to talk to you about things that matter because they fear being ridiculed. So just don't start that. Okay, and you want to make every effort to respond to them in some fashion, even whether it's a nod of your head, if you're in front of them, and they see that, or a touch. If you don't know what else to say, use body language, but somehow interact with them. It's important to let them know that they're being heard. When choices are necessary, you want to keep choices simple, with as few options as possible, and avoiding those open ended questions that I mentioned before. Um, Taking someone to a restaurant, I think this is just the perfect example. If they're handed a menu with 20 options, they're going to have a very difficult time selecting what they want to eat. But if instead you're saying, Dad, you always like the fish when we come here, can I order that for you? Then it's simply a yes or no, or you order them a choice. Sometimes you like chicken here, and sometimes you like a steak. Do you have a preference today? But again, you're limiting the choices. It's not the entire menu. And if you think about this in other areas of the living situation, like for instance, Mom, you need to get dressed. So she goes into her closet and here's, 30 outfits, and she stands there for 10 minutes, not able to decide. But if you pick up something and say, you look so pretty in this blue outfit, or you really like this red one, which would you like to wear? Again, you're limiting the options. You're giving them an option, but you're limiting the option. And remember to repeat misunderstood questions or sentences using other words and phrases. If they're not understanding you, then try something else. It just might be that they're not getting the words that you're saying at that time. So rephrase. Okay, next. More on the body language. Notice I'm saying attempt. A lot of things that I suggest, I know are difficult. So don't blow me off and say, no, that won't work. At least try. Try to use a calm, reassuring voice as much as possible. I know that when I get excited and when I get stressed, my voice gets louder and the tone gets maybe louder, which kind of conveys anger. And so they may not understand the words that you're using, but they'll understand the tone of your voice. So it saves you a lot of emotion, a lot of effort, if you can first just kind of take that deep breath and use that calm, reassuring voice, because you're conveying to them it's a safe place. Try to be positive and use a friendly tone. If you come in with a sad face and a sad tone, you're conveying that to them. But if you come in to speak to them, good morning, Mom, how you doing? It's time to get up. We have a busy day today. That positivity, that brightness will be conveyed to them in everything that you're saying. Again, it's important to avoid that intimidation, which is what I mentioned about standing over somebody or pulling the I know more than you know thing. So, trying to avoid that is significant. Being respectful. Um, I remember my dad in his 70s still responding to friends my age as yes ma'am, yes sir, and it was something he told me that he had always been taught, and it carried him through, and I tend to do the same thing. I try not to call people by a first name unless I've been given permission to do so. I'll use their title in the last name. It is a show of respect, and some of them really cling to that. It's you know, it's just that important to them. It's who they are. Um, and if it's okay, and I kind of hesitate on this one, don't reach out and grab someone, but if you're comfortable with it and they're comfortable, a pat on the hand, a touch to the knee, it can be very reassuring. I know I've heard, and I'm sure you have too, all the studies that are done about people being, elderly people being touch deprived, and I think it's very true. So the more we can hold a hand or reassure, the better. Paying attention or listening At this point is the next thing. And listening is a big part of communication. It's really more listening than it is talking. So it's important to pay close attention to body language. It may speak very louder than the words that they're saying. The body language, especially to me, is important. And when you're asking them how they're doing, is something wrong? And they're saying no, but you can tell by everything about them, the demeanor, the words they're using, the facial expression, all of it says, I'm very sad. Um, or they're rubbing their temples or they're rubbing their shoulder. Maybe they have pain, but they're not able to tell you that. So the body language sometimes just screams to us. Maintain eye contact, very important. Don't pick up the phone, don't text, don't look at the TV over their shoulders. When it's really important, communicate using everything that you have to give them. Important not to interrupt, because it disrupts a train of thought. I use this in therapy when I'm talking to someone and they're flowing very well and I have a question. I really try not to interrupt. I may just jot something down on a piece of paper, a word or two, that will help me when they finish to go back and ask my question. I think this is a good example of how to interact without disrupting. Also, repeating what you've heard is a great way to confirm what they've said. Okay, this is what I've heard. Is this what you meant to say? This is good. Okay, so let's move on now to the crux of why we're here today, which is the therapeutic lying. The therapeutic part means making things better, or it's going to be a little bit better. So this is the therapeutic part of it. So lying doesn't always come easy, but if we think about it as this might be better for them than brutal truths, it makes it better. It makes it a little bit easier. I'm thinking too that, again, this was kind of a new thought for me. At what point do we use this technique? And I'm thinking it's in the moderate to the later stages. In the earlier stages where comprehension is still there, it's more of a memory thing, but we can actually remind them and they get it, then we want to do that. An example of that might be someone who asks about somebody who's deceased. Maybe it's my mother and she asks, where's my dad? And I might say, Mom, remember dad passed away? It's been 3 years now. If she's saying, oh, yeah, I still miss him. Okay, that's workable. But on the other hand, if it were my mother asking about my dad and I'm saying he passed away 3 years ago, and she goes, oh no, nobody told me, and I didn't go to the funeral. Oh my God. And that does no good. So I think that's sort of the dividing line. Earlier stages where there's still comprehension present, but it's more forgetfulness. I think actually giving them the correct information is good. I think the therapeutic lying part comes later on. Okay, I hope that makes sense. These are some examples of some of the questions that sort of work on a caregiver's last nerve, if you will. And these are some you've given me. Where are my children? Where's my spouse? Where's my mama? Where's my daddy? Where's my car? What did you do with it? I need to go to church. I need to go to the grocery. I need to go to the beauty shop. When will I eat? You didn't feed me. I'm hungry. You took my money? Where's my purse? What can I do? I need to do something. I need to cook. And perhaps the biggest one, I want to go home. These I know you've heard and you will continue to hear as long as you're a caregiver. Next. The first instinct when you're hearing these questions is to respond truthfully. And again, like I said before, if that works, go for it. But on the other hand, it might just make things worse. So that's where we use alternatives. There might be problems with brutal honesty. And the worst, I think, is the example I gave with them hearing again that somebody that meant a lot to them has died, and they go through, it's like reliving that initial grief all over again. And I think that that's so painful for them to go through and to see them go through it, that I see no point in that. Because of the short-term memory loss, the response might not even be remembered. So if you're telling them, okay, someone died, they go through this initial panic of the grief, and then 10 minutes later, they're asking, are you going to tell them again? How many times a day are you going to put them through this panic, this pain that they're experiencing? I say, no, it's not needed. It's unnecessary at this point in time for them. Something to remember is if you're saying, well, I'm not sure which side of the line my person falls on. If the individual were rational in their thinking, they would not be asking irrational questions. So, in other words, they know that their mother, who now would be 130, is deceased, but they're still asking about mom. So, to explain to them, you're 92, your mom would be 137, there's no way she'd still be. That does not make sense. It does not register. So again, don't try to be rational. The time for rationality is gone. Patients are often not satisfied with the responses. So maybe that's a good cue that you're trying to be rational when instead you should be more therapeutic. Again, these brutal honesty answers might increase agitation or even increase depression. Again, things that we don't want to see in them, especially if it's unnecessary. Okay, so let's look at some alternative responses. These responses will help to focus on things that are soothing to agitation, that will calm restlessness, and we kind of want to do whatever it takes. If you've dealt with someone in an agitated or restless state, and I just have to assume that most of you have, you know that it's very time consuming on your part. It's far better to me to take more effort to be soothing, to try to calm the restlessness, than to deal with it after it's occurred. It takes more of your time. You want to also find a way to interrupt the cycle of repetition, the questions that they ask over and over and over. Some answers are good, but after a while, it grates on your nerve when they ask for the 50th time, what should I do now? So we're looking for ways to interrupt that repetition. And it also provides a distraction for them. It allows them to move on to other things from there. Okay, so let's go to some examples. Regarding the desire to go home, and I'll put this one first because I think it's a biggie. There's always that seems to be that need to go home. And I think what I've concluded is home is not a physical space. It's not your home or necessarily the home they just moved from, but I think it's that place in mind and place in time where they grew up. And it was being in the situation with mom and dad and siblings and whatever was going on, 70, 80, 90 years ago. And we can't take them back there, but this is where they want to go. So maybe a response is to say, this is where you live now. And depending on where they are, in a home where they have dedicated to themselves, or if it's in a nursing home or assisted living, I always suggest trying to set up that room to mimic their room from home, because then you can take them back to that room and say, "This is now, see, your things are here." And sometimes that is reassuring enough that they will let go of that desire to go home. But if not, here's some alternatives. Okay, you tell me, where is that home that you want to go to? What's the address? How do I get there? This is making them think, okay, where's that home? And you might get a response of, oh, well, no, sorry, I really don't know. Do you remember the address? And even at this point, you're having to think, the more the way from what that initial question, I want to go home, I need to go. If you're having them think of the address and think of the directions, you've provided them with a distraction. I want to go home. So this is one way to manage. Another is to try to put them off. For instance, as the caregiver, now I'm waiting for someone to come. I'm waiting for a phone call. My and I promise, go in the kitchen to see if you're cooking, to make sure the car doesn't work. And so if you can give some responses that, again, will distract from their initial intent and teach them something to think about, and they get away from it. If you're visiting with me and you're wanting to go home, I might say, uh, let's go for a walk instead.
All right. Sorry, y'all. We're having some technical difficulties.
Okay, so if they're visiting with you in your home or even living with you, a method of distraction might be something like, oh, let's walk. To someone who used to, it's time for us to water the plants. Let's do that. Or perhaps you're going inside and you're saying, oh, let's look at some of, tell me who this is, tell me who that is. And again, you're getting them away from the focus on, I need to go home. It's time for me to go home. Another distraction, and I learned this from a nursing home, is to sort things while you talk. This one particular home I remember had a big ice cream bucket filled with doubloons. And after lunch was, and all the dishes were put away, they would sit down and the activity person would open the bucket and throw the doubloons across the table and say, okay, everybody pick a color. And so they would sort doubloons. And that was, again, a focus that was different from going somewhere else. So perhaps you might sit with someone and say, can we fold clothes? I really need to get this done. And it would really help me if you would just help me to do this. Or I have a big can of buttons and we need to find white buttons. Can you help me find white buttons? take plastic utensils and roll them in paper towels and napkins. And it's like, we need these for dinner tonight. Anything like this, it brings back memories of things that they did at one time and at some point in their lives, and it removes them from that distraction of, I need to go home. Okay, moving on. The next one is having to do with the deceased spouse or the elderly parents. And I've already kind of touched on that one. But some responses that might help would be if they're saying, where's my mama? Where's my mama? Then to maybe say, I haven't heard from them today. You're not saying they're deceased. You're not bringing the pain of that death back. And you're not technically lying. For those of you that have difficulty with that, you're just saying you haven't heard from them or you haven't seen them. And maybe that's a little bit easier for you to do. Where do you think they might be? Again, you're giving them something to think about. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. Where do you think that person might be now? I don't know where they are. Would you like to look out of the window? I'm never confirming your look out the window and wait for your mom to come. Okay, because if they're kind of on the line, they might say, okay, I'm looking out of the window and mama's not coming. You said she'd be coming. Where is she? So you get yourself into a worse bind, but you're leaving things rather vague. Would you like to look out of the window? And perhaps they see a kid riding a bicycle, they see the mailman, who knows? But it's something, again, that will distract from that need to go home. I think, too, when they are asking for certain people, like especially a spouse or a parent, that maybe it's because they need something. Like for instance, if they're asking for mom, are they asking for mom because they're hungry? Do they need to go to the restroom? Are they sleepy? Offering, can I help? Do you need something? Can I help? That may satisfy that request in looking for that person. But again, lastly, reminding you that retelling about a death, being that honest, can often just trigger that renewed grief. And it is painful. All you have to do is look at their tears, look at their eyes, and you experience the pain because they're experiencing it. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Allegations about theft of money. Oh, this one is so sensitive. No one wants to be accused of taking things, and especially money. So how do we get around this? How do we convince them we haven't taken the money? Again, if they were rational thinking, they would not be asking this question. You have to tell yourself, if you can remember at the moment, that excuse me, your mom in her right mind, or your dad when he was clear thinking, trusted you with paying bills, with all of his funds to make his decisions, and now would never accuse you of taking money from him. That's where you have to find your satisfaction. But to convince them to say, oh, you would never do it, might be more difficult than possible. So again, what can we do to distract? Questions perhaps like, well, gee, how much money did you have? How much are we talking about? Are you looking for coins? Are you looking for bills? What kinds of bills? Again, maybe you can pull some coins out of your pocket and say, well, here, I have this, and that might be perfectly satisfactory. But you're trying to avoid, I wouldn't take your money. Again, we're increasing the agitation, the very thing we want to stay away from. Maybe a question like, where did you last have it? Was it in your wallet? Was it in your pocket? Feel for your pocket. Is there something in your pocket? Did you leave it on the table? Or, gee, maybe you spent it. We went to the store yesterday. Did you buy something? You wanted a gift for your granddaughter? Did you maybe spend it on that? Um, did you buy groceries for yourself? Did you spend it on that? Yeah, maybe you spent it and we're not thinking about that right now. Or where do you usually put your money? Let's look. And normally that's going to be a purse. So then the question comes, well, where's the purse? Okay. So we have to look for that purse. Let's look for it. I think it's great if you can have maybe 2 or 3 purses that look very similarly, because there's going to come a time when you can't find that one purse that they're looking for. You don't need a lot in that purse. Nice handkerchief, not Kleenex, but a handkerchief, because they used handkerchiefs. So maybe a handkerchief, maybe a wallet that has a few $1 bills in it, maybe an old set of keys, a comb. And you have, like I said, maybe 2 or 3 of these purses, maybe one in their bedroom, one in a closet, one in a living room, where they can look through it. And so, here's your purse, and look, here's some money. Okay. And maybe that's all it takes to calm them down from that fear of having lost the money. I think it would probably be very unnerving to be in a situation where you kind of know you need money, but you kind of don't have a handle on it. And so I think we need to be very sympathetic towards this. Do we need to pull out a bank statement every time they ask about it? No. But maybe just reassurance, Mom, you have everything you need and you have money to buy if you need more, and I'll make sure that you get it. So again, a lot of reassuring. You don't have to pay for anything here, especially in like assisted living. When meals are brought to them, sometimes they feel like they need to tip or pay for that meal. And reassurance, everything's paid for. You're not going to get a bill here. We've already paid for that, so you don't need the money. Okay. What about saying maybe that the bank is closed today or at this time, but we can go to another day? Meanwhile, what bank do you go to? Let's think about that. Um, do you have a card that you use instead? Do you use a credit card? Do you have that? Do you write a check? And these are things, again, anything can be made to look like a credit card. I would never say give someone who is confused a credit card or give them a checkbook. That's looking for trouble, obviously. But if it's an old, maybe a AAA travel, auto club thing, or any kind of a store card, these reward cards that we get now, anything like that might serve the purpose. A check from an account that's closed might help. But the whole purpose is we're trying to help them feel better about this financial situation, to have them understand that they don't need money right then. Okay. Let's look for a minute, move on to food.
And Rose, I wanted to give you your 15-minute warning.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. When they're asking, and I've seen this more often, I'm going to say in a nursing home than any place else, where I might go to visit a patient who is sitting at the dining table, that I saw the tray being removed. And after I tell them hello, they're saying, I'm so hungry. They didn't give me any lunch today. They didn't give me breakfast. And so I could say, look, there are crumbs on your dress. There are crumbs on your, I know you just ate. That doesn't mean anything. They're saying they're hungry. So another approach to this might be to say, really, you're hungry? What would you like? Can you tell me what you want? Can you show me what you want? What do we need to make that? If they just want a snack, it's like, okay, how do we make the snack that you want? And help them to do that. Something as simple as maybe crackers with peanut butter or crackers with cheese. And even if they've just eaten, a couple of crackers are going to be okay. We're not saying cook another whole meal. We're saying something just to satisfy what they're asking for at that time. Another alternative might be to hand them a cookbook and say, "Oh, look, can we find a recipe? I feel like cooking today. Let's look for a recipe. What do you think we need to make this?" And get them to help you make a grocery list. It doesn't matter that you already have dinner cooking, that you're not going to go to the grocery store that particular day. It's an activity that gets their mind off of something. Then there's the let's start dinner together. Yes, maybe they're not safe to cook, or maybe they have difficulty cooking. Maybe now they use sugar for salt, or put something else in a recipe that where you wouldn't need it. So, but how about doing the things that they are able to do? What about washing the potatoes or washing the lettuce for the salad? That makes them feel like they're participating. And all the while you're saying, "Oh gosh, this is so helpful. Look, can you stir this pot for me if it's safe, or could you wash these few dishes for me?" So you put a little soap and water and let them wash something that's plastic or unbreakable. It doesn't have to be perfectly washed. You can always stick it in the dishwasher later if you need to. Again, giving them something to do that's purposeful will help them to feel better. We can always say too that we need to wait for the rest of the family to show up before we eat, or that maybe we do need to go to the grocery before we eat, but you're giving them some direction. You're getting away from the demanding, "I need to eat and I need to eat now. So how do we help get past this?" I think these are some good alternatives. Okay, so let me just go ahead and wind up with this. I remember hearing something beforehand that says, when you share information with someone, consider why you're sharing that information. And I think this was done more in the sense of maybe gossip. Like, why would you tell somebody that? What purpose is it going to serve? It's going to hurt their feelings. It's going to make them angry. Is this really what you want to do? Okay, I'm thinking this is something different. When we're going to be brutally honest with someone and it causes that panic, it causes them severe agitation, is this really what you want to accomplish? Or is it that, I just want them to be in a place of comfort? I want them to be at peace. Then question yourself, how do you do that? Maybe bending the truth is not so bad after all. uh, get them back into thinking of something that's more pleasant rather than the brutality of maybe what they're actually asking. And my parting advice is to be creative. Please take some of these suggestions. And I have to say, I think one of the most frustrating things for me is when a caregiver says, "We've tried all that." Come on. You couldn't possibly have tried everything. Maybe there's, out of 10 things I've suggested, maybe there's at least one that you might be able to try. And being creative to me says, if it didn't work today, there's a chance it could work tomorrow. Or, well, it worked today, but it may not work tomorrow. So be always on your toes, trying something different. And I say never throw it out the window. Always make an attempt. You never know. And every patient is different. to say, well, my neighbor tried that, my cousin tried that, so and so tried that. It wasn't the same person, it wasn't the same situation. So, bottom line, don't be afraid to be creative. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. That
You're
was a
welcome.
wonderful presentation. So helpful. Communication is just one of those things that is can be a hurdle for any family, no matter how experienced the caregiver may be or anything like that. Such a difficult hurdle to overcome. This is the time now. If anybody has any questions for Rose, you can go ahead and put them in the chat box or any comments or anything like that, and I'll go ahead and read them off. I see a few comments coming in for you, Rose. Great presentation. Thanks for a great presentation and some wonderful tips. Several thank yous coming in for you. I'll save this for you so you can see it.
Thanks. I apologize for the awkwardness of it.
No, it was wonderful. It was wonderful. Couple technical errors with the internet, but other than that, it was great. So I have one question that came in for you, Rose. Lots of nice comments, but this question says, it can be so hard to be creative. Can you give us an example of creativity?
Okay, creative in the sense of, depending on what the situation is, you're trying, let's say the person's living at home with you, you're trying to get dinner done, and they're constantly wanting to go home or needing something. Where's this? Where's that? The idea of the bucket of doubloons or the container of buttons and having them sort and give them the sense that, oh, this is really important. I need to stitch buttons onto shirts. I have some buttons to replace, but I only need blue buttons. While I do this, can you take care of finding blue buttons for me? That's what I mean by creativity. And remember, the end product is so much less important than the value of what they're doing. You want to encourage them. Oh, thank you so much. This is a big help. Or just the fact that they're looking and saying, oh, this is such a pretty button. That's what's important, not the fact that they put green buttons instead of blue. It doesn't matter.
Awesome. Thank you. We do have a few more questions coming in, Rose.
Okay.
This one says, any advice for if they hear voices telling them to do something, maybe experiencing hallucinations? Any tips for that?
Yes. On a personal note, my mom passed away about 2.5 years ago, and I was very fortunate. She was almost 102 at the time. In the last week or two, she was experiencing hallucinations, and I had never really dealt with that to that extent on a personal level. So I can address that to a degree. Mom would ask me, well, do you see such and such? Like at one point, I remember her saying she felt like there were vines all over her wall. My mom was an avid gardener, and I think that had something to do with it. But she'd say, you see that wall right there? It just looks like it's covered with vines. And so I'd tell her, Mom, I don't see them, but tell me what you think they look like. And I'd say, what color are they? And she would describe it. And I'd say, is it a big leaf, a little leaf? What kind? And that would eventually get her to move on to something else from there. The more you give them to think about, I think the more it changes their focus from where they start. She used to call to, and this was right before she passed away, she would call to her brothers. She had 5 brothers, and there was one brother in particular. I don't know what the connection was. I thought, they were all pretty got along pretty well as far as I knew, but there was one that she would say, James, and in this voice that was unmistakable. And I'd just say, Mom, what do you need from James? Where's Uncle Jim at? What do you need? And then oh, he's doing such and such. And I'd say, oh, well, I'll just send him away. And I would just maybe shut the door. We had a curtain on the room for her, between her and the rest of the house. And so I just pulled the curtain and I said, I made Uncle Jim go on the other side. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I tried not to blow it off, but to address it and sort of, I guess, in a way, dismantle her hallucinations. But know too that there is medication that can sometimes help with hallucinations. So always let the doctors know that this is going on.
Thank you, Rose. That was a great question, a great answer as well. A couple more for you. How do you get them focused when they are confused?
Okay. Again, this so often depends on what you're trying to get them to focus on. For instance, let's say it's mealtime and you're having difficulty getting them to focus on the meal. Did you think about perhaps sitting down and eating with them? I know that might be a time where you say, okay, let me put the meal on the table, and then that gives me time to put a load of clothes to wash or do something else. But if you take the time to sit and model for them, then they will more likely be able to focus on eating that meal because they're seeing what you're doing. It's like, oh, okay, yes, let me do that. And the same for something else, like if you're trying to get them to focus on what, maybe a schedule, maybe they have a doctor appointment that day. Again, using good communication skills, face to face, eye contact. This is the doctor we're going to. Remember, he's your primary care doctor. This is Dr. Phillips, and his office is in that great big building, the one that you like to go to because there's so many windows. So you're bringing it back to them. You're giving them an image that perhaps they can relate to.
Wonderful. Here's our next question. It says, my mom is a compulsive buyer on QVC and I cancel without telling her. I've limited her email access and have changed her QVC online password. I hate to rob her of the joy of shopping, but she can't keep stocking her freezer with desserts and hamburgers at an inflated price. Any suggestion? It also says she picks up the phone to order now and QVC offers no help.
That's a toughie, and I've actually had a client that did that very thing to the point of when her husband passed away, their home was paid off. She had no bills whatsoever, and her family actually had to take out a mortgage on the house because she had run up thousands and thousands of bills from QVC. And the things that I saw were things that were in excess. She was the only person living in a 4-bedroom house. And when I tell you every closet was filled with clothes, most of them still with tags and in the wrappings and so forth, candles, kitchen appliances and so forth. And what we did was to try to block the phone as much as we could. We tried eliminating the sources of payment. The family took the credit card, and she was early on in the dementia process, so she could understand. So I even made a sheet for her to assess her own activity. And I said, okay, anytime you want to buy something, write it down, how much it costs. And when I come, we're going to look at it. And we're going to decide which things you really need. And that seemed to be helpful. But now, again, this was an earlier stage. In a later stage, but then I don't know in the later stage that they would have the capability to do the ordering. So maybe it is more in the earlier stages you have to be concerned with. But that's a real tricky one. And sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. I know you're saying you don't want to take away her ability to do this, but it's harmful to her.
So helpful. Thanks, Rose. And we have one final question.
Okay.
Can you discuss a little bit about redirecting?
Redirecting in the sense of what we're doing is just the opposite about the question on focusing. You're trying to break the focus or refocus. So it's slipping something in front of them or to take something. Okay, I'm getting beside myself. It's like you have something in one hand, something in the other. You want to take this hand away and get them to focus on this one. That's the easiest way to put it. So the refocusing is going to have to be something that they're into, like maybe they like coffee, so in the afternoon they're trying to focus on going home, and you said, you know what, I was just getting ready to make a fresh pot of coffee, why don't we have a cup of coffee? And you could probably redirect with that instead of them focusing on going back home again.
Thank you so much, Rose. Great questions and all great feedback as well, and a wonderful presentation. So helpful. So many good tips to take home. So
Thank you.
thank you
Bye,
so
Sheila.
much. And thanks to everyone for joining in today too. We'll see y'all next time. Thank y'all.